Welcome back to the Press Club. Of course, we're discussing the industrial situation between our public servants and our government negotiating team. The public servants, of course, let me single out the CSA because they are the union that has decided, or have decided, if I say they, it must be have decided, to strike as of Monday. And yeah, we're discussing that and looking at the implications for the island. We're also looking at the government and implementing austerity measures.
Yes.
Now, the big story, you raised that as well. The big story all of this week was that Jadia Japie-Emmanuel, the Prime Minister's press secretary, her medical bills were paid for. Now, while I don't have an issue with that per se, okay? While I don't have an issue with that per se, because it is a responsibility of the government to take care of the public, okay? However, Jadia Emmanuel is a political appointee, and people are making a comparison to Tamara. I can't remember her last name. Tamara Charles, right, of the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, who was in this unfortunate accident, and from the indications, close to $750,000 spent on her medical care. Now, she's not, I don't think that she should be dragged into that argument. And I think it's quite unfair and unfortunate that people, politicians and political hacks, have dragged her into that.
But again, that was inevitable that they would have to make some kind of comparison.
No, but you see,
somewhere.
yeah, you made a comparison, but she has been dragged, and she has been
more or less her private business.
You know, well, it's not that it's private business because it's public funds, okay? But she was a public servant,
yes,
okay, and she did not enter the public service on any political ticket, as far as I know or understand.
She ranks, of course,
right, she wanted to work in the public service. She wanted to be a police officer, so she applied, and she was a part of the force until, I think she still is, but she's part of the force, and she suffered this unfortunate incident. However, Jadia Japie-Emmanuel did not go through these ranks. She came through and was appointed because of her support for the SLP.
Right.
Now, whereas I don't have an issue with her getting support as a St. Lucian citizen, you know, it is very interesting. It has put the government in an interesting position where now they have to answer. They have to answer the question as to why don't you want to pay us our increase when you're spending so much money to pay for the medical bills of this person who is a political operative.
Yes.
You know, so it's a fair question to some extent. But then when it comes to health, I think we have to look at things a little different. She's a St. Lucian citizen, tax-paying citizen,
well,
and the only comparison that can be made is if favorable or preferential treatment was granted to Jadia, if there was someone who was equally ill, who was not in that position, would the government fork out that amount of money for that person to seek medical attention? And this is where the argument becomes legitimate to me.
I think that's why some people felt that Tamara Charles' situation could have been brought into play, but again, being that she's a public servant, it kind of confused things. But the question is, there are individuals, if tomorrow you or I get sick and we can't afford to pay the medical bills, there is a process by which you're supposed to go to apply for government, saying, okay, I am in this dire straits, I can't afford because my particular situation is XYZ. You're supposed to go to the Ministry of Health, I believe, and you bring your documents, you bring the documents from the doctor, etc., and you apply. And there's actually, I think the National Insurance as well also has a facility that allows for assistance to be given to people who can't afford medical treatment. They've had a lot of people who've been assisted. However, there is a process, and it's through it actually happens through certain facilities within government. The question was did that happen in her case? Apparently in her case, all of those, you know, there was a shortcut right through.
Well, I don't know if that it did not happen, because remember the documents that were exposed, were being circulated did show that the acting PS in the Ministry of Health signed the document to release the funds.
But generally those things do take quite a while. I have been privy to one or two cases where people have been at their wits' end, because especially when it comes to children who are at death's door, who need medical attention urgently, who cannot wait, and government says we could only give this amount based on our policies. So the question is, again, nothing has been said. The question is, in her case, what obtained? Does she have her own private insurance that's going to come into play a little while, in a little while, and say, okay, government paid XYZ, but the private insurance is going to reimburse that money because she has her own private health insurance? What is the situation? Again, people, there's a lot of conjecture. And government, again, there's been very little said from government. Right. The Prime Minister did say there were special circumstances, and you understand she does have a very important position. It's, you know, it's unfortunately we make judgments based on what people bring to the table, and in her position, being so close to the Prime Minister and being his mouthpiece more or less,
right? So
being privy to a lot of information from
is she very important? Is she very important to the Prime Minister, or is she very important to the country?
Well, if that is the question. To the Prime Minister, you would automatically.
It does not necessarily follow, because there are some people within the ranks of the St. Lucia Labour Party who are very important to the Prime Minister, who may not necessarily be very important to the country. They are important because they keep the Prime Minister and the Labour Party in power. Right, so in that way they're important to the Prime Minister, right. But they don't necessarily have to be important to the country to the extent that if they're not around, another person cannot do a similar job for the country. Now, I mean, as I said, you know, when it comes to health, it's a ticklish issue, but I think in the whole mood, the whole atmosphere right now has caused this situation to come out.
Yes.
If we were,
it has kind of put the spotlight,
right,
and kind of enlarged it.
If we were in a different environment right now, and we're not discussing wages and the government's inability to pay, then I hardly believe that this would have been a big issue.
No, I think this would have been a big issue regardless.
No, seriously? I don't think it would have been a big issue. I think that most people would come out and say, you know, as you said, you know, she's the press secretary. You know, she has this thing. The government has a duty to help any member of the public that it can help, and she's a member of the public just like anybody else. So I think that we're getting our glasses are tinted when it comes to this issue because of the environment that we're in right now and the atmosphere surrounding that environment. So
that's debatable. So again, the question is, however, since it's public funds, how much is the public entitled to know about the situation? Are we entitled to know exactly how much was paid? Are we entitled to know where the money came out of? Who's going to repay? Is it going to be repaid?
No, of course.
At least there should be some explanation, some clarification. Unfortunately, it has come out in that manner, which was not the best way for it to have you know, been made public, but that's the situation right now. That's in the past. The future right now is explaining how much was paid, why was it this really the amount, and what were the circumstances under which were again, did she have to go through the usual processes, which we know they are established processes. So it's possible maybe she did go through the processes and to get that, you know, to get the funds.
And it's not doing the government any good that, you know, as you said before, that they're awfully quiet about this situation. Now, we know Jadia, she's a very vocal person, and we know that she would come out, you know, she'd be on the Facebook and the social media speaking on different issues generally. But then when this issue came out, she has not said anything about it. We
also know she's very diplomatic.
Well,
so again, it's one thing to speak.
Maria,
she's diplomatic. She's not, you know, she's a very intelligent young lady.
Yeah, she's very intelligent, but I would not
say. So no, she obviously has to consult
she's a very intelligent individual. I give her that. I would not necessarily say that she is very diplomatic. You know, because
no, you wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't, because I have had occasion where you know, I had to. You know, I speak with her very well, and I think she's a fine individual. But there are certain instances where I had to point out to her that when you are press secretary, you represent the Prime Minister, who is the leader of the entire country. Okay, it is different from being a political spokesperson. So the politics that you're used to has to be put on the side, because now you represent the entire country. It does not matter if the person voted for you or not. You have to act in that way. So
but I mean, she's come a long way since.
She has come a long way. I think
you can say she's diplomatic. Maybe not initially. You know, there were a few little teething problems.
Yeah.
But again.
But I think it's unfortunate that this situation has arisen. Yeah. And people are questioning why the government has paid for it. I think the government should come out and make a statement and say, you know what, this and that is the case. And you know, and let's move on from there. But when it comes to people's health, I really don't disagree with assistance being given, public assistance being given by people's health, because without health you have nothing. You understand? Right. And health knows no color, health knows no party, health knows no
when you need
no status, no yeah, exactly.
And of course the SLP government, they actually are the ones behind the intended national health, which never national health insurance, which has not taken off. There was a pilot done, I think, with diabetes.
Right.
But and the actual,
and that pilot was shot down from the sky. So, yeah, but I think it's I want them to come out and speak. From,
seriously, and this shows the need for it. If there was a blanket, some blanket national health insurance, maybe we don't have that question being asked right now. Maybe it should have been covered underneath it, and that would have been just par for the course.
Yeah, again, I want them to come out and speak.
She may have gone through the processes that
we don't know because nothing is being said. Yes, and I want the Prime Minister or whoever it is in the administration to come out and state exactly what the situation is and explain to the public, because we have a right to know. It is public funds being used. And you ask the question whether what sort of details should we know. I mean, we should know at least how much money was spent. And not only for her, for the people that the government has assisted. Yes. You don't have to single her out, but then
I think it has to be, for example,
it has to be an accounting. There has to be an accounting process for how public funds are being spent. How much was allocated for public assistance when it comes to medical expenses and that kind of thing, and see what proportion of that was taken to assist. All these things.
The NCF has a very nice way of actually accounting for its funds on a yearly basis, an annual basis. So again, I think those numbers are available. Whether or not she falls onto did she go through the processes? The process established for people who need assistance with medical problems.
We'll know very soon, because
we may know very soon.
We will know very soon.
Government has a lot on its plate right now.
Well, we will know very soon, in good time, because the government will issue a statement.
Will. Thank you, sir.
No, I am saying this because I'm expressing.
Inevitable. You feel it's inevitable.
Yeah, they have to. They have to. Come on, they have to. We need to know. I mean, it's public funds. We need to know. Let's move on to the IMF report, and I alluded to it earlier on in our discourse. The IMF report, whereas some stations were reporting that St. Lucia was had weathered the storm, the difficult post-crisis, right? Is it environment? People just and it reflects a lacking on the part of our media personnel as well, because they took this one sentence to suggest that St. Lucia has done well.
We're on a good footing. We
good footing despite the economic challenges.
Say, yes, we are here.
But if you continue to read, and if you don't mind, let me just borrow your machine here. It says that the central government's overall deficit has gradually widened to an estimated 12% of gross domestic product, or GDP. The deficit has widened to 12% by fiscal year 2012 that ends in March 2013. And public debt increased to about 78% of GDP. I don't see how that could be a good footing for us.
Could you imagine if you had a salary and 78% of your salary was
debt?
That's
before you start buying your rice and sugar.
78% you have to go pay a loan.
Right, exactly.
78% of that.
They said that monetary conditions, on the other hand, have not been supportive of a stronger recovery. Policy rates have remained unchanged for the past 9 years, so that's over 2 administrations. So it's not one party or the other, one administration or the other. It's both of them, because over the last 9 years, both parties have been in power. Despite the policy easing in the United States, and lending rates have declined only marginally, and that is propped up in part by the 3% interest floor on savings deposits. So they're saying that part of what is propping up the economy or holding things in check is the fact that right now we have a 3% floor on interest, a 3% floor on interest on savings. So when you go to the banks and put your money there, you don't get less than 3%, and that is what is shoring up part of the economy.
Put your money in the banks.
Yeah, well, 3% is not much when the lowest you get on a loan is like 8%. So I don't.
Yeah, but then
the split there's like 5%. Let's not go there. We don't want to go there. Not today.
Not today.
Now, the executive board's assessment, here is where it talked about the wages, the second paragraph there, where it says that directors agreed that the main policy imperative is to address the fiscal imbalances and set debt on a sustainable path. They urged the authorities to start consolidation without delay while minimizing the negative impact on growth. In this regard, they recommended focusing the adjustment on current spending, including wages and subsidies. That is what I alluded to, including wages and subsidies, while protecting productive investments and targeted social spending. Wage agreements should be consistent with fiscal and economic fundamentals. Directors welcomed the introduction of the VAT and underscored the need to protect its base. They saw scope, listen very carefully, they saw scope to further widen the tax base by reducing tax incentives and exemptions. So some of the exemptions that we enjoy, like for education, you can bring your computers in and all these things.
And don't forget the private sector as well.
Right, exactly.
By the private sector, by
and
big businesses,
the hotel industry getting all those exemptions.
These also
they see the scope to widen the tax base by reducing those tax incentives. So all those hotels who come in with their tax holidays for 10 years and that kind of thing.
I think that was kind of alluded to in one of the arguments about the public servants, in that they saying that the government has a lot of money that it needs to collect.
Right.
But again, who's collecting the money? I don't know. Public servants seem to feel that they're not the ones collecting it, but somebody needs to collect the money on behalf of government. And again, we're looking at, you know, all these businesses, all these tax exemptions, all of that could come on the...
I mean,
on the collected monies.
If you read that as being on a strong footing, man, I don't know, but I'm telling you, literally, I get chills reading this, because this does not point to any strengthening of the economy.
But some of the gains that we've made, for example,
in a short time,
we've made gains in agriculture, but that comes after there's been a downturn for 2 years. The gains are from a valley. You could be rising from a valley.
Exactly.
You're not gaining. You're not adding on to a mountain that's already there.
Right. You know, so you have to look at those in context.
Yes.
Because if, for example, you're at this level and you have dropped to that level and you have risen to this level, you have reached nowhere. You understand? It's not really a gain.
It's that we've gained, but what from what position?
There is what they call it, real growth and is it nominal growth? I'm going into my economics now. I don't want to do that. So it's not really. Yes, agriculture has improved. Those who play with the numbers and those who want to use the numbers to pull wool over our eyes would say that, you know, oh, we have gained here and there. But then when you look at it in context, it is a gain from a deficit position. So it's not really any significant gain.
It's not. And you have, again,
it's encouraging. It's encouraging, but it's not where you'd like to be.
To some extent, I wish this thing had gone into arbitration, although the CSA said that government has influenced arbitration. I don't know how that's possible. They said government has influenced any possible arbitration, so that would not be fair. But no, it would give an opportunity for the arguments to be presented. Because again, there's only so much we're hearing. It would be
the emotion would be taken away from it.
A lot of people don't understand, you know, well, emotion, everybody.
Yeah, emotion would be out of it, because you have people who are versed, who are professionals in that field of arbitration.
Well, they feel that these professionals have been compromised somehow. Although the process of selecting, nobody has been selected as yet.
I don't think that's a valid point.
But then it's been said that.
So you're discounting the ability of arbitrators to be what they call impartial. You know, or disinterested.
That's not really, I
don't think it's fair to them. You know, you're
saying
that
she works in the private sector, so in the public sector. Is that saying because you work in the public sector, you're on government side? Obviously not. Yeah,
I mean, you cannot discredit people just because you believe. You cannot separate issues from personalities.
But I think some of these things need to be gone into in a little more detail in terms of the country's financial status and what the IMF is saying.
We'll have it in the budget, I'm sure. Yeah. We'll have a lot of it in the budget.
But before the budget, we had this looming situation right here on Monday. We had the situation that has to be dealt with immediately.
I tell my wife all the time, you know, I don't really worry about a lot of stuff. You know, things will work themselves out. There are certain things that you're in no position to change, and it's pointless trying to change those things that you have no power to change. At the end of the day, you stress yourself unnecessarily. Give yourself more grays. In my case, yours is more browns and reds, you know, and you actually accomplish nothing. So let it play out. I think the two sides should sit down and meet and come to some sort of understanding of what it is.
And hopefully they'll understand, for example, take into account things like that IMF report, which put things in, which should
that IMF report. Another aspect of that, you know, is, you know, and speaking with the Police Welfare Association, they indicated to me on Wednesday that during that IMF meeting, 2 people represented unions on the island. Yeah. The president of the TUF and the vice president. That is Cyprian Montrop. Let me go in order. Julian Monrose and Cyprian Montrop. And they were not even aware that the IMF was meeting with the unions.
Oh.
So, you know.
They weren't?
They weren't. And then there has been no report to the TUF as to what came out of that IMF meeting. So, a lot of
IMF, you mean report by whom? Because I don't think the IMF is bound to report.
No, by the TUF to its affiliates and membership of what transpired, because they were representing unions.
Yes.
They're not representing any particular.
What did you say on my... In fact, you should have told me in advance that you were speaking on my behalf so that I could give you an idea of what I need to be highlighted.
Yeah, and there's even more to that, you know, some people are saying that these guys went in there totally unprepared for that meeting. You know, I don't know how true that is. It would be nice to hear from the president and Cyprian Montrop.
Well, the membership hasn't heard from them as yet, so...
you know, what transpired in there. But
yeah. It will be interesting to see what happens on May 1st.
It will be interesting to see what happens on March 18th.
On Monday, that's Monday. It's always interesting because you always see all these people taking the opportunity to strike, the opportunity to be part of the sick out, etc. But then when you look at occasions like May 1st, when the unions ask them to come out and support them, they're all out on the beach, you know. They do nothing to support. And I wish, to some extent, government had adhered some of those requirements. Do you know why? One of the requirements being that there be an automatic deduction for your union dues. Everybody who's calling in sick, some of whom are not even members of the unions, it would be great to just have automatically every month your union dues come out of your salary, so then you have good reason to be part of the strike action.
You're an autocrat.
No, I'm not. I'm a Democrat.
You're a dictator.
Strong democracy.
You know, why would if I don't want to be part of the union, why would you just take my money out? We'll find ourselves in
whatever the union, whatever gains the union make on behalf of its members, you benefit from it.
The union is like a public good. You know, they're there. Even those people who are not paying into the system benefit, you know, so you have the freeloaders and stuff.
You become.
Yeah, but
would be giving them more.
But then you cannot force people. You cannannot force people to be part of an organization which they have not opted to be.
You can force them to take the increase, though.
You don't force them. You'll force me to take an increase. No, you don't have to force me for that. No, come on.
They're happy to take the increase. There's no force there.
Yeah, there's no force. The only people that use coercion, the only agency that uses coercion to get money from people is the government.
And what about the church?
No, they don't use coercion.
That's not coercion?
No. I mean,
really, if you don't give your tithe, you wouldn't go to heaven.
That's not coercion. You decide whether you want to go to heaven or not.
Yeah, but he lets me know.
I don't think that any church preaches that if you don't give tithe, that you go to heaven.
Tithe is part of the requirements. Saving other souls.
I tithe, but it's not because I'm afraid of going to hell.
Really? Why?
No, I tithe because I see that there is a requirement in the Bible for me to tithe, and I do that.
But why is there a requirement in the Bible? Isn't the Bible the book that tells you how to get to heaven?
There are certain things. We're going into a religious discussion. There are certain things that are salvific, and there are certain things that, you know, just benefit you and cause you to have a fuller life on earth. Okay, there are certain things that have nothing to do with your salvation. The sad thing about it is there are certain churches or preachers who say who link those things that cause you to live a full life on earth to salvation, which is totally a skewed perception of what it is. And I don't want us to go into this, so let's take a break. When we come back, we'll continue with our discussion. Of course, we're discussing the new Pope who was elected at the conclave in Rome, one of the shortest conclaves in history, following the resignation of Pope Benedict. And of course, we have a lot more to discuss as the news happened for the past week. Stay with us. And we go